It's a little more upbeat. That second part of the track, right? Or,
Picking it up.
All right, so it looks like we're going live on YouTube and going live on Facebook as well. So, alrighty. It looks like we are live. We're live on both platforms, YouTube and Facebook at this point. Welcome back, guys. It's good to see whoever's watching us right now being live, and whoever's watching us if you guys watch this later. If you're driving, welcome. Keep your eyes on the road. If you're in the gym, keep pushing it. And so again, thank you for joining us today. So I'm joined by, as per usual, by Matt, my good friend and mentor of Growth Clinic. How are you doing, Matt?
Anton, it's great to see you here as always. We're definitely in that self-examination type mode, I would say, tonight, right? It's Tuesday, coming up on 10 o'clock here.
Yep.
Busy week. It's summer, supposed to have some fun, but it's busy time as well too here. So always great to catch up with you here and talk a little business.
Yes, sir. Well, guys, so we thought for today, we thought to just kind of taking it easy. We know we usually kind of throw a bunch of news and insights, and we actually spent a lot of time, right, man, as far as researching it, and we're like becoming kind of like these news junkies in a sense that's like, is this relevant? Is it not? Like, I'm definitely digesting through a whole bunch. So, but tonight we just kind of thought, like, let's just have a conversation, and conversation about something that has been a bit on a kind of on a low burner. It's been in the back drawer. It's been kind of what's the term? Like, we've been kind of talking about it, but kind of not. We're all kind of got used to it, and but at the same time, like, there may be a problem here that we're just not maybe discussing as often. And so, and just as a society, I don't know, Matt, what you think, but like I definitely find myself very often not finding an opportunity, let's put it this way, of like fully expressing myself. And at times it's like there's a plenty of kind of desire to do so, but like you are in a certain environment, you just don't feel comfortable. Like these people, this group of people, they're not necessarily are on the same page, for example, on certain views as me, right? And then I end up just being kind of like, well, let me just keep my opinion to myself. And then I come back home and my wife already heard my opinion. So, and it's just like, and that turns into this siloed kind of reality, right? So what we thought about talking today, guys, is the title we decided to kind of choose for our live stream is The Lost Connection, right? Do you guys feel like you're disconnected? Do you feel like you've been living that lifestyle, that new kind of mindset since some 2020, mid 2020, maybe late 2019, and it's just been going and going, and it's not necessarily helpful to you? So, Matt, what's your thoughts? Like we put some thoughts, some notes here and thoughts in terms of that, but where do you stand on that? Like, do you feel the same way, or is it just me?
Yeah, let's set the stage here, right? We've talked about this a little bit where, resetting the stage post-COVID, right? This new normal, right? There's been this kind of surge in excitement this summer, right? Like this was really kind of the first kind of what we thought is normal summer, right? Last year was a bit of a head fake there, COVID out, COVID coming back. A lot of these events weren't really back. Now they're really starting to pick up again, right? Even this month going into next month, right? A lot more concerts, things going on. But I think we're starting to get the sense that it still feels very different, right? Like I thought it would get back to early 2020 or 2019, and it doesn't feel that way. It feels kind of busier, but it's different, right? And it's like, is it just me? Is it just us? Is other people feeling that as well too? I think it's a little bit of combination of all those, but I think let's talk about that a little bit more here as far as connection and examine that a little bit more. What happens when we're disconnected from people? What are the benefits, right, when we do connect with people? I think there's a lot there that's worth examining and talking about a little bit there. So,
Yeah.
um,
And I also feel like we're kind of stepping on this ground where you have to be a little bit vulnerable, right? And it's not always a cool thing, like especially for men. Like I feel like maybe ladies, girls. I definitely see my wife like sharing with her friends certain ways, like how she feels, and it's kind of becoming a part of the conversation, and that gets to be expressed, and maybe as a result you feel better. But there's something about guys, right? We're like, I'm good, I'm fine, everything's great, right? And then becoming vulnerable, and especially about something like this, it's kind of like, especially back in some really few years ago, that was kind of like a no-no. It was your own thing. You had to figure it out on your own. I feel like we're becoming as a society a bit more open and a bit more acceptive of it's okay not to be okay, right? And it's okay to express it. And I do feel like it's a lot more kind of a healthier way to deal with it. But I was thinking, so in the past couple of weeks since we haven't met here, I've been thinking like, what prevents us from having a dialogue? Like, it is such a wonderful. I love that word, dialogue, right? Conversation, relationships. Like, the basis for any relationship is a conversation. It's just as simple, right? It's really hard to have a relationship with anybody without having a conversation. And what you and I right now we're having a conversation. We've had a longer conversation prior to this live stream, and we're just gonna continue it, right? And like on the basis like of our relationship, like you and I, like our friendship in a sense, and part of it is kind of displayed here, on public, and part of, I mean, 99% of it is not. Like, what's your thoughts? Like having a dialogue, like for example, like I'll be honest here, and like we're not always on the same page for when it comes to certain issues, right? Like I don't necessarily always agree with everything that you say, but but somehow it never, at least in my mind, prevented me from having a dialogue, conversation, relationship with you, right? Be it politics, religion, I mean, some complicated subjects, be it money, business, all the stuff that you and I were talking about. Like, and I wonder, well, at first I wonder if it's the same way with you. So be honest here for just a split second in front of everyone. But like, you feel the same way? Because I'll voice my opinion, right? You know me.
Yeah.
Because
No, that's
why our dialogue is still going on? Why is it still happening? And in certain situations, you're like, oh, you don't agree with me? Well, we can be friends. What's your thoughts?
I think that's part of why we are friends, is when you find people that you can have an honest dialogue with, right? I feel like there's friends that are like, they're sociable friends. They're fun to hang out with. They invite you to parties and dinners, and they're good people, right? But then there's a layer of friends that are a little bit more real with you, and that's kind of hard to come by, right? That's hard to find, because everybody just wants to tell you that you're doing a good job. You're working hard, everything's great. But I think that's with us probably pretty early on in our friendship, was like, and it wasn't always let's say emotionally vulnerable type topics, but it was, hey, what do you think of this picture, right? Like, you would just text me like, what do you think of this graphic, right? And I'm like, I don't know, maybe something seems a little off balance here, like something's not quite clicking. But I'm like, you probably spent a lot of time working on it. Like, I don't know if I want to offend them about it, but
you would always
usually
come
wants
back.
to know.
You would always come back with, I would change this, 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 this. And I took it as always like, that is awesome. Like, finally, because I sent it to my wife. My wife goes, "Oh, it's so wonderful. It's great." Like, she's very like supportive, like which is great. You want to have a friend like that. You want to have definitely be married to somebody like that. But at the same time, like, okay, this wasn't very helpful, like in this particular situation, right? So then I sent, like, I sent it, to a couple people. Then I sent it to you. You're like, okay, here's my thoughts. You would send me a screenshot of like you would put some doodles around it or something. Like, here's what I would do. I'm like, that is so helpful. This is so cool. Like, I really appreciate like you taking time and looking into it and kind of thinking about it. And sometimes we'd be like the next day, and I was like, hold on, that took him a little bit of time to figure it out. So you did. It's just wonderful. So Yeah, so that's
Yeah.
see, that's kind of giving you feedback on that. Like that's so wonderful, and I never feel, and I think I understand why people would feel certain way. Like you were saying, oh, I've designed it, I think it's great, versus, well, it could always be improved. Like, what are you talking about? And there's an individual here who's interested in you, in the thing enough to give the feedback. So yeah, so I think that was a great example.
So, I mean, that's a small one, right? But that opens the door towards more complicated issues, right? Potentially, if it's somebody that you trust, you can go to, you know that they're going to give you their opinion. It might not be right, right? Like it might be off. You might have a different artistic style on something. Maybe a person's more modern and likes clean lines, and someone's more classical and likes it more homey, comfy feeling. But it sets the stage, I think, for some trust and some deeper discussions. And it feels like we're in a time of society where it's it's hard to say honest things, and even if they're factual, and not just get attacked from everywhere from different sides, right? Like we
Interesting.
all, it
Yeah.
seems like, have these kind of crazy friends, or these just like, you post something, it's with good intentions, and then it's just like somebody just wants to come in like a wrecking ball and just make you look bad, and then you kind of look foolish if you're arguing with this person, but you don't want to just let them say whatever they want to say when it's not true. So it can get messy, right? With these relationships, how much do we share online? Maybe how much should we just share person to person within a group? But I've seen incredible results working with a team of, 2, 3 people, artists getting together that can share their different expertise, opinions. Much, much, much better product that could ever come out from any one of those individuals. And when they're done, they feel better about it as well too. It can be tough to slug through because maybe somebody took the lead, they spent a lot of time on it, and maybe you broke that down and restarted from scratch and built it back up into something better. So yeah,
See,
maybe
it's
we
interesting
talk
you.
about that. Like how do we kind of build it into something better?
Yeah, see, it's interesting you're mentioning this. I've been a part of a few conversations like that where you're building something, and I mean you're going back and forth, and it feels like it's never ending. But you're right. At the end, you're looking at the product. You're like, it's better than I thought it would be, and everyone kind of feels the same way. It's like, wow, it was kind of blood and sweat, kind of in the meantime, figure speech again. But it was hard. I mean, it took a bunch of time and everything. But like at the end, there's value there. At the end, especially if you're designing a product or a service, right? At the end, the consumer, the patient, the user benefits out of it, right? So I love that quote to where Steve Jobs, he was giving one of those press conferences, and people asked him. I think it was actually like an investor press conference, stockholder meeting, and they said, hey, no, never mind, I'll take it back. It was just a kind of like a sit down thing, and somebody in the audience was kind of trying to catch him. They were like, hey, we've noticed that Apple is very secretive about lots of things, which makes sense, but you never share any sort of conflicts. Like it seems like Apple is so organized and everything's so fine, and there isn't any sort of internal conflicts out there. Do you guys have conflicts inside of your team, like with people that you immediately work with? And I remember his response, and it was wonderful. He said, oh, of course we do. We have wonderful conflicts. And that just told me about that growth mindset mentality, really, of a guy who says, like, listen, and then he said, I can't even describe like how many times per day I'm told that I'm wrong. And I respect those people the most because I would listen, then I voice my opinion, then somebody's going to tell me that I'm wrong. And then all of a sudden, there's a debate. And then the word argument, right? I always thought of that word argument for some reason as a positive word. Like I thought of like going from school and kind of educational background, like you go with the scientific argument, right? Well, guys, here's a little research that I've conducted, and here's what I found out. What do you think? The other guy comes up and says, well, there's a weak point in such and such. I've done a better research, and here's my argument towards it. Here's my assumption. And all of a sudden, there's this scientific argument happening, and as a result, we're learning something, right? And they're not, like, if you look at these conferences, they're presenting opposite views, But like I've attended quite a few of those, and then they shake hands at the end. And they're like, "Thanks, it's awesome. Good to see you here. Hey, let's do it again." But during the conference, they were like, "Well, I disagree with you, sir." And I'm like, "Isn't that? Could we do that as a society? Man, what's your thoughts? Like, how do we do this as a society? Like, should we do this? Is it possible, or am I just going crazy here?"
I think it's possible. I felt like a year ago, you would hear people state facts and things that we've agreed about for 1,000 years. They would just say something normal and they would just get lambasted, right, by the media and just like, there's just so much gaslighting, it seemed like that was going on, right? And I think a lot of companies and people were just like, we don't want to get into the conflict. We want to avoid this. So we're going to come out maybe with some statement or dial it back, walk it back, and hope for some forgiveness. But it seemed like that just kept coming and kept coming. And it feels like maybe there's some regrounding taking place with individuals stepping up, wealthier individuals that just like, I don't care. Like, this is just what I believe. And you're not going to deplatform me, right? You're not going to cancel me. In fact, by doing what you did, you actually just made me stronger, right? In my views and opinions, and convincing other people that I was right as well too. So I feel like that pendulum's maybe coming back to how do we have these type of conversations, respect each other's opinions and their opinions, their views. You take some of them, right? And we're just different. Like, I think, we've gone from a world that was fairly disconnected and separate, within the last 100 years to just rapid change, right? There was never population changes like this. You look at certain countries and the percent of foreign-born citizens that are now there. I think it was like Switzerland, like just almost pick any different country you can imagine here. And it's like the population has started to shift a lot. There's been major ideas that have changed, that have come in, that have been trying to figure out how to work through. So, but I think it's happening. I think people are a little bit more comfortable maybe standing up on their opinion, or they're tired out and just saying, this is just my opinion. Like, fire me. I don't care because this is what I believe. I'm not trying to hurt other people, but maybe I want to practice religion in a certain way, or I have certain political views that are a certain way.
Yeah. And it does feel like as a society, we kind of became better at it, right? We started accepting certain things, at least formally, right? At least kind of on the outside. We said, okay, this is okay. You can worship in the way you want, things like that, even if you're being part of the, say, larger corporate organization. So I feel like we're kind of making progress in that. But at the same time, something since the last couple of years ago, right? Something is just not, it doesn't feel the same for some reason. We're seeing a whole lot more of that like cancel culture that you've mentioned, which, okay, again, we're not here. See, the first thing that I initially you start saying something, I was like, well, let me voice my opinion. But what if, like right now, what if I don't need to voice my opinion? What if we just can say, like, we can understand certain things, but at the same time, we can do it better. And just all agree upon that. Now, question becomes like, how do we do it better? Like, for example, I always think of every time, like, I don't watch TV almost at all. If anything, I watch like some YouTube, this and that. And as soon as I like come across a clip over any sort of major TV network out there, I hear some, I'm not used to, I guess, hearing that type of language, these short sentences with definitions, they're not defined. And then we throw these definitions out there like climate change, inclusivity. Like, just understand that we're not understanding. Like, when I say apple, you don't think of green apple. I think of green apple. You think of red apple. And when you say inclusivity, certain people get nervous when they hear this, right? When they say climate change, like, do we even understand what are we talking about? I mean, we all understand we need to protect our planet. There's nothing bad about it. But somehow there's a group of people out there like, what are you trying to, like, what type of initiatives are going to be coming as a result? Like, because we're not talking about that. Why don't we do that? And I'm just thinking like legal. There's two industries that I always think of. They kind of got their communication, down, and it's pretty well defined. Like two industries that cannot make errors in communication, right? It's legal, like contract language, essentially, legal area. Every contract has definitions at the end, right? Every good contract has definitions at the end, because when you say product, what are we talking about? Engagement, what are we talking about? Like project, like there are lots and lots of things out there. Like you want to clarify expectations, clarify the subject that you're referring to. So that's one, legal, right? And the second one is, it's kind of weird. It's been kind of like a passion of mine. I'm a drone pilot, right? I'm not a real pilot. I'm a fake pilot. But I love everything that has to do with airplanes, and I literally spend hours and hours sometimes listening to this air traffic communication. It's funny. There's a lot of funny stuff out there. Just Google air traffic communication, and first thing is going to pop up on YouTube. It's just funny stuff, how pilots forget to turn off their radio, or the tower is going to tell them something that they totally confuse them. But like, that's the industry that has to figure out their communication, right? You cannot have errors in communication when you're carrying a bunch of people in the back. There's hundreds of people in the back. And imagine, say, 99% is good, right? Like in lean, for example, everybody who studied lean, they're like, 1% is not good enough. I'm sorry. 1% is like, they're saying, 1,000 short, long landings of the airplanes, like essentially so think about it, 1 in every 100 airplanes is going to crash. It's good enough, like, no, I'm sorry. So in lean, for example, we say it's 1,000th of a percent, like that sigma piece. So maybe that could be like as an error, as a defect, that's allowable. But even then, you want to kind of roll it back a little bit and make it smaller. But pilots figure out their communication, right? And their communication is very, very simple. And I've been trying to implement that in my personal life. Like, for example, a pilot would go, "Hey, I am such and such. I'm talking to such and such. This is what I'm trying to say." The other party goes, "Hey, I am such and such. You are such and such. I heard you, and here's what I say." And the pilot goes back and says, "Confirmed. Yes. Okay. Good." So there's some overlap going on. So it's like, here's my message. Yes, I heard you. Here's your message. I'm confirming. And the pilot goes back, "I confirm that I heard you." Somehow that simple framework eliminates most of the confusion. I heard that expression too. It says, the biggest problem in communication is an assumption that it has happened. Like, I come to you and say, "Hey, Matt, why don't we do such and such?" and walk away. I think I've communicated, right? Now, I coded that communication in a certain language. Now, you've decoded it in a whole different way, right? I never heard any sort of confirmation, any sort of, "Well, hold on. I think here's what you were saying. Is that right?" And I'll go, "Yes." We just don't do that. And I just think simply from that TV channel language to where, like, "Oh, yeah, climate change, such and such," or somebody's like, "These group of people fighting for human rights, and these people are preventing it from happening." Like, are you sure? Are you sure they're trying to prevent, like, human rights? Like, who would fight against human rights? Isn't human rights wonderful? But then we hear all these, like, I think in the course of that conversation, if I would, if we were to disagree, right? And I would say, "Matt, hold on. Let's step back. How do you define such and such?" Then we find ourselves in a situation where our definitions are different. Then I go, "Well, hold on. If I define this particular piece as you know what? Then you actually make sense." But because we don't spend enough time, like, see, that's an effort. We don't define terms, and then we just kind of like, "Well, I'll disagree. Goodbye. Hater." Everyone's a hater, So it's yeah. What's your thoughts on that?
I think it's seeking to understand first, right? And it's people stepping back, where it's like, I think almost everyone is a good person, right? Or has kind of good intention. I shouldn't say everyone, right? But probably the circle of people that we're, talking with tonight, us, right? Like, they usually have good intentions, right? So maybe there's a political disagreement, but a lot of times, like, you look at what they're both trying to achieve, and it's usually trying to come to a better point, right? It's like, okay, that maybe makes sense now, but let's think about, how's that going to work in 5 or 10 years or 20 years, right? What's the impact of that, going to be? So I think it's assuming that good intent, that positive intent, maybe that the person has. We all know those people that right away don't assume that about a person and just
Mm-hmm.
like to kind of create some of the chaos. But I think, like you said, it's important maybe to repeat that back, like within your business, within relationships.
Mm-hmm.
Repeat it back, right? If you're agreeing or if you're not sure, ask them. And sometimes you're just floating ideas out there, right? Like, hey, in 2 weeks, right, on Saturday, there's going to be this family get together with my aunt, and I think it would be fun to go, right? And like sometimes maybe you're working on something else, or you're just like, I'm not sure, right? Like you're just kind of throwing that idea out there. You might not be one way or another too much about it, right? But you're just kind of putting it out there. But yeah, at what point do you maybe reconnect back to see like, hey,
Hmm.
does that sound good? Or I know people will ask me about things like that, uh, and a lot of times my response might be, uh, like it's just like, like I've heard you. I'm not necessarily agreeing to it
Hmm.
yet, and you may need to circle back with me, or let me think
Mm-hmm.
about that for a little bit, right? And we'll get back together and we'll talk about that. But
Mm-hmm.
I think it's important if you're listening to your team, right? If they have a concern about something, if they're upset about something, like summarize that and repeat that back to them. That makes a person feel so much more wonderful that, hey,
Mm-hmm.
I'm being heard. You're listening to me. Like you're taking the time to try and understand that, to summarize it back, right? And you can kind of take control of that conversation maybe a little bit more, right, with
Mm-hmm.
the team, and maybe laddering that up to, hey, this we're all after good intentions here,
Mm.
and let that person get out their view. And also maybe are there some other opinions out there? And then okay, let's decide as a group here what's maybe best. Or if you're the manager, all right, let's make the call. Here's what we want to do.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I
Yeah.
like how you
Yeah.
say seek to understand first, right? Sometimes we are engaged in a dialogue, in a conversation where that's not what we're trying to do, right? As the person speaks, we're already thought of how to come back at, we've got a good kind of punch that we can throw back because our opinion is, of course, the right one, and the other person is so confused and all. Yeah, no, I think you make a
Hmm.
lot of sense here. So I think we need to definitely understand first. I also think of some other ways, like for example, what else would make us disconnected, right? What else would kind of set us up for this kind of disconnected and siloed life? And I can't help it but to think of like social media, right? And younger folks, I know, especially by research, tells us that, right? Uh, Facebook internal research tells us that, right? You guys have
Yeah.
heard that the Congress
Right.
hearings and all. Facebook internal research said that Instagram, girls of certain age, like they're experiencing mental health issues as a result of, oh, such and such has the, I don't know, she's driving this nice car, and that girl went to on vacation, and this girl just looks good, and this girl has a nice guy, and look at these diamonds and everything that this girl has, and it's just so somehow it's affecting the younger population. But I think we're all being part of this, right? We're always thought of like, I can easily kind of jump into a thought of like, well, Matt lives in this beautiful house and he's got a big beautiful lake in the back. Like, wow, like he he got there. Like, look, and I'm here. Like, you know, it's so easy to just kind of look at that and say, oh, I don't know, such and such has a better car, and such has a more this. When we look at each other, certain people have kids, certain people don't have, and that brings a certain situation, and that kind of feeds maybe into self-esteem, right? This is where we kind of become a bit more like, well, my life is not as great as what other people portray out there. So let me just kind of, not participate, not show up, and let me just kind of be that quiet person and just kind of go back and get a drink, you know. So my dad was like that. So for a split second, I mean, my dad was an alcoholic, and I do. I do see that in some people. I literally know some really close friends of mine, and I see that in them. They just haven't gotten to where my dad got towards the end of his life, and then he actually, he passed away. And it was basically as a result of alcohol. That's just kind of keep it simple here. But I see younger folks that have these tendencies. I heard this expression actually: lost connection and what do you call this? The addictions. They come hand in hand. There's a great book. That's why we called our talk tonight "A Lost Connection." There's a great book out there. It's called "Lost Connection," and it talks about addictions. So I just recently heard the definition of addiction. So addiction is gradually gradually narrowing a scope of your dopamine sources. So essentially, we're enjoying so many things in our life, right? We like to go outside, we like to ride bike, we like to communicate with each other. But then slowly but surely, like, well, now I don't like people, right? Now I don't want to do physical exercises. And my span, my horizon of things that gives me dopamine is slowly but surely narrows down to this one particular or a couple of particular things. And that's it. You're called an addicted person. You cannot, dopamine and neural connections out there, it's a strong thing. It's a habit forming. And it could be almost anything you think of. It could be your job. It could be substance. It could be TV. It could be any sort of thing outside of it. So that's what I'm thinking, like, how should we treat like social media, and what should we do? And is there anything that we can like remind ourselves every time we see this beautiful life and yachts and islands and everything? We literally go on these beautiful places and islands. Like, I stopped posting things, just kind of like I'll start my everyday. I'll post these conversations with Matt that we do every 2 weeks, like, because this is my life. This is my everyday, right? That one trip that I took this, past August. I mean, I was there like for 3 days. Let's just be honest, But somehow that picture is going to live forever. It's going to get a lot of engagement, and all of a sudden, Anton is traveling places. Like, no, I'm just like you. Like, my carpet needs to be vacuumed. Like, I need to go and organize my desk out there. Like, I need to dust my furniture here. Like, no. And I feel like the more, maybe with this whole growth clinic like culture, like the community we're trying to create here, we always have been saying that, but maybe we should be a little more intentional about it and say, let's just be real, and let's just be vulnerable. And if somebody's here to judging you, well, that person sorry, you're a hater. We're gonna hate haters. But like, I would love to create a society in which it's okay. Like, you can just be who you are, and there's something beautiful in that. Not just boats and islands, but something. What can we find like that is so fascinating about an everyday life? Like, are we forgetting something? Are we not seeing these little gems that we're like tramping them with our feet? Like, sometimes looking at stars that are unreachable. But like, tell us, like, what truly matters to you? Like, what drives you, I guess, on a daily basis? Like, when you wake up in the morning and your house needs to be, Matt is in the process of kind of remodeling his house and everything. Like, aren't you like tired of it? Like, what gets you going?
I think you're right. And I think anyone that's owned at least one property, right, knows they're almost always in the process of remodeling their home. And I think that's like that in our lives as well too, right? Where it always feels like we're kind of remodeling our lives. There's some areas here, right, we need to work on, need to lose a few pounds, need to work out more, need to read some more books. Like, there's always something, right? Like you said, that appreciation for, and it's almost always the things in life that are free that are like the most meaningful, right? It's going to watch, a sunset up here in Michigan, in Lake Michigan, right, over the beach, and just everybody just stops on the bluff and just watches, and just, that's free, right? Like, and yeah, you're right. There, maybe not everybody can travel there, but we all see the sunset, right? Wherever you're at, it's almost always just a beautiful thing. So it's finding some of those small things, right, first, to look at. And going back on the conversation as far as this like connection, the meeting, the like, let's look at the extreme side of what disconnects us kind of first, right? Like, what are those things that disconnect? And it's really that fear of feeling everything too much, right? Is when we start to pull
Mm,
away and disconnect.
mm,
It's numbing yourself to that, right? And it's a defense mechanism. We talked a little bit about some of these defense mechanisms that we have, but it's like I'm feeling something too much. It's uncomfortable, and now I'm pulling back.
mm,
And there's some healthy ways to manage through that. There's some unhealthy ways to handle that. Like you
mm,
talked about alcohol, right? A very big one. Um, marijuana, just like recreational type drugs, right? There's 20 cannabis marijuana places that just got set up here, like over in the last year and a half in Michigan here. Like you can see it on people's faces that they're just more kind of numbed and chilled. Maybe everything was just too much, and they're looking for a way to kind of pull
mm,
back, right? So exhaustion is another thing, right? That can kind of like it leads you to that point, right? And pulling back because it's just too much, and maybe you're just not getting enough sleep, right? That's always one where I check myself first, as far as like I know I'm in a bad frame of mind
mm.
today. I've got some decisions to make. Am I in a good position to do that? Have I rested last night? No, I slept 5 hours. Well, all right. I might want to think about that. I might want to sleep on that, right? And think about that tomorrow when I'm a little bit better
Mm.
frame of mind there. Um, so yeah, it's like trying to reduce that stress, that anxiety, to pull away from it. But when you pull away from it, you're not just pulling away from that one particular stress. You're pulling away from that whole connectivity from everyone. Like you're separating from that. You can't just separate emotionally from one um, thing or problem, right, without disconnecting with other parts of your life as well, too, right? So
Mhm.
it's important to kind of circle back and, all right, what can I actually do about this, right? And
Hmm.
I think we've talked about a few ideas. You've got some there. I've been reading up on some there, and I think it makes a lot of sense to share out here.
Yeah, yeah,
Um, yeah.
yeah, definitely.
Oh,
I was gonna say, so okay, let's shift gears a little bit and kind of talk about the corporate sector here. I know it's late and everything. I know it's
yeah.
like almost like 10:30 at night right now, but what are the implications? So we kind of talked on the personal basis here, right? So our anecdotal kind of personal experiences, so to say. But what about, so since like this life is all about relationship, right?
Mhm.
And when you do business with people. You don't do business with companies, right? It's people.
Right.
What are the implications like of us being disconnected? Like, is that troublesome? Are we like for economy? I'm just thinking like, for example, in the country that you live in, say society kind of shifts in the kind of post-COVID isolation, right? And we're all being a little bit
Mm-hmm.
numb, a little bit used to. Uh, what's the consequences of that? And what if you're not able to figure out relationship within your organization? If you are a hiring manager, being one, you keep hiring an individual, like one individual after another, and you somehow feel like there's this one perfect human being out there. You just haven't found him yet. Where maybe possibly you already had two or three, you just haven't figured out how to do that. So maybe it's not them, maybe it's you. Or like between colleagues, maybe you're working on a project, like you were saying, having these tough meetings to where somebody's going to say, Matt, you know what? I think there's a better idea. Or like, hey, Anton, what you did, I mean, no offense, but there's a better way. And at the end, again, we're making something bigger and better. So should we figure out that thing pretty quickly here? Because otherwise, I mean, we're just going to go over and over and over. We're going to step on the same rakes, like, and it's going to hurt over and over. So it's almost like maybe this time, and maybe because you're listening to this right now, maybe this is the moment. Maybe it's okay to look in the mirror and say, yeah, I do have a lot of problems. And maybe that's the beginning of their solution. You know what I mean? So maybe it's not them. Maybe it's you. And we're not going to ask anyone out loud here, like, oh, put a comment below if you think you were wrong in the conflict, or be vulnerable and tell the whole world about such and such. But like somewhere deep inside of you, maybe it's time to just admit that and say, that's it. I'll be better at such and such. I will not keep thinking it's them. Maybe, possibly, there's also me factor in it. Do you think a corporate world could benefit out of kind of doing the connection relationship better?
I think it's clearly struggling right now to re-engage,
Mm,
right? It's not clicking along the way it used to be, right? There's something like Carter reported something like 62% of kind of the new hires, right, that kind of routes through their system, 62% were remote workers.
mm.
That's a very different world,
Yeah,
right? It's
a
a
lot of workers.
very, and it just creates a lot of things we're just not used to working through. Companies are not fully set up for employees to work remotely. Even the best of them, right? It's new. It just happened, right? Like we've pretty much been working the same, right, for the last 100 years, right? As
Mm,
far as people coming into the company, working, manager, hierarchy, keeping an eye on people, um, and it's fresh. Like people are frustrated in their own lives with their own situations, and then you layer on top of that what their companies are doing
mm,
or not doing or changing their positions, right? Apple's calling people back into the office, then they're not. Then it's
mm-hmm.
like there's no clear answers, and each business is very different. At least before, it was you were going to show up to the work to your work for the most part. Maybe you're in sales, maybe you're in the field, but that was small percentage, of the company.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and now, even a lot of those individuals in sales, they don't want to get back to traveling. They just
Mm,
they just don't. Like
hmm.
it, maybe it was fun to go out to restaurants and all this food and all these places and see things. And yeah, it is, but it's like a lot of that now you can find within maybe your own city, right? Great restaurants. And now maybe you have kids and
Mm-hmm.
you got two dogs during COVID, right? Because it seemed like a great idea at the time. And now, like, how are you supposed to get back to work? And,
Mm,
you know, I, I think how we're going to work through this is those employees need to be super honest with their managers in the company on what they believe for their role, what seems
mm-hmm.
to work best, right? How are they going to get the most productivity out of them? Because I
Mm.
think individuals, they want to maximize their potential, and the company wants to maximize, hopefully, right, that
Yeah, yeah.
employee's potential as well too. But it's not like we've been talking about this honest dialogue and conversation back and forth. It's a challenge to do, and now you have different ways of working within each functions. It could be very different.
Mm,
Maybe it's finance, maybe you don't need to be there. You're used to the accountants and the bean counters that are there just kind of being quiet and always showed up on time. Maybe you don't need to be there. Maybe it's better that you're at home, or maybe it's better, hey, we have an office here. You want some quiet space, reliable internet, we're here for you.
mm-hmm.
I
Mm-hmm.
think companies are going to have to really wrestle through this, and it's going to take some leadership, major calls, right? Company by company on
Mm-hmm.
this is how we believe is best for our company. We ideally maybe would like these individuals to be here, but to be able to get that type of talent, we can only do that by hiring remote workers, right?
Mm-hmm.
Therefore, it's going to be a mixture of both, right? And we're going to give you better tools over the coming years, right, to work through that. That's what really hasn't been clear. You and I have looked at some of the technology, Microsoft, some of these other companies are kind of developing to work in that modern world, but it's not really here yet, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
still
Mm-hmm.
very clunky and
It's getting
awkward,
better. Yeah.
and you got to learn all these new things, and then maybe it
Mm-hmm.
doesn't really work out. Maybe Slack's not the greatest for your group. Maybe it's wonderful, but there's going to be a lot of figuring out, and I think that's stressful for people too, right? So it's going to be, I think, a stressful next couple of months. Typically is when September, the rubber usually starts to really hit the road at companies here. Summer's
Mm.
over. We're all back. We're starting to gear up for next year. We're getting those budgets and those estimates together. Starts to get, really real in September and October.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
So what do you think?
we're almost in August, right? So it's usually time for vacations and things like that. So hopefully you guys take a little bit of time to go some other place, and don't do a staycation. See, I'm a big fan of traveling and going somewhere. Just leave the house. Staycations are really not good for your mental health. But hopefully you take a little bit of time this August and just kind of reset yourself, recenter yourself, right? Rebalance yourself, and come back as a different manager in office, right? Maybe it's time. And Matt was talking about tools, right? Technology.
Mm-hmm.
What about culture? Like, it's if you're a leader of any sort in your organization, and you are, let me just remind you that you are. Even if you're an accountant, right? Even if you are, you may think that you've got this insignificant role in there. You are a leader. Just start thinking of yourself as such. And if you are, well, then you're part of the culture. Then the culture in part depends on you. And so, yeah, we there is a thing out there to where like we don't want to voice our opinions because sometimes you do feel like you're being punished for an initiative, right? So you go, oh, who came up with this idea? Matt? Well, let Matt do it. You're like, well, I thought, okay, well, never mind. Next time I'm just not gonna say it, right? And things like that for, oh, guys, let's have a better conversation. Let's share more. You're like, well, you go share now. And all of a sudden you're like, okay, never mind. I'm just going to stick my head in the sand and we'll just go from there. So, but anyway, but it's not an easy thing. So I know, I get it. We don't live in this ideal world out there, but every single time we engage with an individual out there, we can make it a better place. And I'm a big fan of that kind of thinking. So take a little bit of time this August, get some rest, read a couple of books about leadership, about culture, about connection. Remind yourself like why you do what you do, right? Reestablish that desire for you to go back in the office and actually show up and engage and be there and interact with people and ask somebody how they're feeling after they've been sick with COVID for a week, right? How do they feel after such and such, had a medical situation, what about their kids? And it doesn't have to be a long conversation, right? So I'm a big fan of also like this whole not being extra friendly, right? Don't exhaust yourself, right? You don't have to be, your smile doesn't have to go from here to here, right? Just be you. And people appreciate you for who you are. But like every time you're open, every time you ask a question, every time you're genuinely interested in another human being, that other human being will appreciate it, regardless of how you do it. So don't exhaust yourself. And I like what Peter Drucker said. He said, choose a comfortable pace, but keep going steadily. Right? He called those people plotters. Right? You just put one step in front of the other. It doesn't exhaust you. And instead of doing it in spurs, in short sprints, we're running a marathon. And so if that sprint that you just finished exhausted the heck out of you, it's okay. Go and rest, right? Take a vacation. But at the end of August, bring all your kids back home, go back to the office, and maybe this is time. Maybe this is time to, just start being a different person, so to say. So, we're not, this is not our usual discussion, man, right? We're not throwing Amazon has purchased the medical company such and such, but like we're being super real. So hopefully you guys, when you listen out there, you guys getting sort of value out of this. But yeah, sorry.
I hope the time is going to be right, because it probably with COVID and politics would have been impossible to get everyone back, right, with as divisive as views as everyone had, with very, very real safety concerns in there too, right, for a lot of individuals. And almost no concerns for some, right? If you were 20 and healthy, you weren't really as concerned, right? Maybe your parents live with you, right? Maybe you're taking care of them. That could still be a very real threat and concern.
Hmm.
Yeah, COVID is still out there. I was reminded of that about a week or so ago in my family, and it's still a very real threat and concern there. So, just a couple things there, real quick, Anton, on that connecting, right? Let yourself feel and reflect, right? When you're feeling disconnected, something's happened in your life. That first step is really just kind of addressing and knowing it's out there, and that's part of kind of tracking your baseline, knowing how, hey, I'm normally a pretty happy person here. I'm not, things aren't going as well. What's happening in my life? Like, what's one or two big things, right, that are happening, right? And sit with that and think about that. That's not a weakness. That's just dealing with reality, right? And a lot of people
Mm-hmm.
don't want to deal with reality. That breathing, that meditating, that awareness, right? If it's a 20-minute walk, if it's a 45-minute walk, exercise. Yeah, I saw a number the other day that just like kind of blew me away. 45 minutes a day, you're like, that's a lot of exercise. 45 minutes is 3% of your day,
Mm.
right? 20-minute walk is 1% of your
Mm.
day. You can't take 1% of your time to focus on yourself and your health and your mental well-being.
Mm.
Hopefully, maybe you're socializing with somebody else too. You're grabbing your neighbor along the way, get them out for a walk. Um, Being creative can really help in dealing with kind of uh,
Mm.
con- connecting and reconnecting. You can express things through art that may be difficult for you or a person to articulate, and it just kind of starts to free things up. That connectivity, your brain starts to re-engage again, right? You can make a list of goals, things you want to accomplish and get done, and work your darndest to go towards that list. And you start checking things off, and you're like, yeah, I can do this, right? I am moving things along here. And like we talked about earlier, just enjoying those little things. It could be anything. It could just be going to an art show. Could just be going out to a movie. Uh, I was shocked in my Kellogg days with how excited people would get when there's a new movie coming out. Kellogg, they do these different sponsorships, right, with Avengers, these different Nemo, things like that. Um, they hadn't been to a movie for 5 years. Like, I love going to movies, right? We go to movies. Like, I'll go to a movie by myself. I don't care. I like to like, I'll drive hard. And then when it's time to like clear my head and disconnect, that's what I'll do. I'm like you. I'm not as huge on television just cause like you and I, like, we like to learn, right? So our entertainment might be watching a YouTube video on maybe how to do something or
Mm-hmm.
what's going on in the world. So find something, do some kayaking, travel, like you said, international, get something lined up too. It doesn't have to be a vacation next week. When you have things to look forward, believe me, being up in Michigan, working in Michigan all those years, setting some dates on the calendars where I knew I was going to get out from the cold, that meant a lot. And just the planning process involved with that, getting friends together, that really helped me to kind of stay connected with myself, with others as well too. There.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Well, definitely good takes today, Matt. I definitely appreciate when you said start valuing the free things, right? That don't cost money, some simple things. So that was definitely something I kind of got out of this conversation. Like you're saying right now, like find time to rebalance yourself, so to say. Like,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, go watch a movie by yourself. Like no one's who said it's wrong. Who said we need to be anything and do anything. Like just whatever gets you back in the groove. Like at the end of the day, whatever it is, it really meant to be good for you, right? When you say, every time I hear the word like, oh, love yourself, like go love yourself, like I always remind myself like, okay, so there's two ways to love yourself, right? One is a chocolate cake for breakfast. Just love yourself. Like eat a big chocolate cake for breakfast, right? How like just treat yourself to something like that. And then the other one is hit the gym and go work out really hard. Love yourself. And I'm thinking like every time I think of what's the effect of what is loving yourself? What is love, right? Is it like when you give something to the child that's not necessarily beneficial to the child, and without even him understanding it, right? You're spoiling that individual. And so is that love? At the end of the day, I mean, that person is going to have a really hard time integrating in society and have a job. And like, what are you doing? That's not necessarily love. And so that chocolate cake for breakfast, I mean, just try to like imagine this is like a gauge, this is like a dial, and amplify it. It's like volume. Like go louder on your habit, and just think of what consequences this will bring you. So do that chocolate cake, do it bigger and more often. That chocolate cake in the morning, well, that's a trouble waiting to happen, right? So we're not talking about those type of things. Like don't go in August and just like let yourself loose and just do some crazy stupid things out there that in the long run actually harm you. But think of, say, a gym, like an extra exercise, like, okay, dial that up a little bit. Yeah, I'll go exercise more often and more vigorously. Well, that's actually not that bad of a thing, right? And at the end of the day, you feel better. You've been outside. I love biking. I keep talking to Matt about it. My friend and I, we go out there. I mean, we hit it hard. And he's the same mentality as I am. Like first he thought I was crazy, but now he's kind of like on the same page with me. We're like, we just do it extra hard, and it's hot outside, right? We're sweating like crazy. But then you get to the point where we sit down and we would like open up a fruit or something, a watermelon. I mean, your mind is so sharp. Your oxygen has been, you just re-engaged your entire being into being here, being present. And so I just wanted to clarify, this is what we're referring to. So guys, again, hopefully you find a moment to go and kind of analyze your current state, right? Are you disconnected? Because, if you are, there's a better way. Like Matt gave today lots of kind of crumbs of wisdom out there. Go find those simple, free, inexpensive things that truly matter, right, in life. And sometimes we just don't have enough friends. Go find a friend. Be friendly to people around you, and you'll be surprised that there are individuals out there and relationships out there that will enrich your life like nothing ever will and ever did. So, Matt, I think this is a great conversation. Why don't we kind of continue that, or maybe why don't we like create that thread throughout all of our conversations here in Growth Clinic, and just remind ourselves about the fact that there's a better way, better design for this world. There's a better design for a product, for a service, right? You always talk about that. But there's also a better design for an organization, a culture, a way to do certain thing. And so I definitely appreciate the expertise that you bring to the table here every single time, and all the experience that you've had, Kellogg's days and things like that. So yeah, any sort of last thoughts that you wanna share before we close?
I think that's great that we basically have to talk more about this, right? If this is about Growth Clinic and growing, like we have to talk more about this kind of connectivity, this honest feedback, this, I worked in CPG for a long time, right? Consumer packaged goods, it's things people are actually buying, consuming. There's so many times where I've launched new products, regardless of the company that I've been working with, consulting with. There's the tendency to launch products that are like, they're kind of 70% of the way there, right? To where they could be. And it's usually on some timetable, and it's maybe some creative third party, and it's maybe a plant that has had certain capabilities, and it's difficult to change that up. But at the end of the day, all the excuses, you're still coming up with a product that's 70% of the way there. And you really need to be 95% of the way there, right? And maybe you iron out the rest of the 5%, right? And you keep innovating, you keep making iterations of that in the future. But when you're not getting that feedback from others early on that, hey, this isn't ready to go, right? And having those honest conversations about that, like, that's almost the worst thing somebody could do to me, is like not give their feedback on something that would have prevented me, from being successful.
Well, but Matt, I don't want to hurt your feelings,
Right.
Yeah.
Right. But
it's
that's
okay,
where it's like,
right?
And I think being known as a person that kind of gives honest feedback about things, that kind of sets the stage, right? Because it's like, if you're a very quiet person and all of a sudden you just like, I'm just going to lash out here and like give my honest feedback about something, that could be perceived as an attack, on a person here, right? But it's when you're in that mindset, when your team's in that mindset, and your manager
Mm.
hopefully is in that mindset too.
Mm.
Uh, but there may be other managers kind of fighting against that. You might have a project manager, and they will bite, kick, scream, what to get you to get that project finished out on time.
Mm-hmm.
And they just may want to move the project forward. And you're like, I thought we had till this date, and now
Hmm.
you're just like, now you're kicking me down the stairs here. Um,
So it's
and
it's almost like when you when you present your feedback, there's a way, right? There's definitely a way to offend people, and there's definitely a way to make them hear what you say, right? So that's on the part of the sender, right? And on the recipient part, on the message recipient part, there's a way to hear other people despite how you feel. And I just feel like if both parties, if two individuals, if a group comes together, hey, I'll here, let me spend an extra effort in finding the words that I'm trying to say. I want to be respectful. And the other person goes, hey, let me make an effort into kind of dialing myself down a little bit and trying to see the intent behind what the person is saying, because that person is trying to help. And so I feel like if we just as a society, again, create that different framework and become a bit more engaging, I think that post-COVID nonsense that we're all experiencing right now, I think it's gonna go away. And I think there's definitely a better world, brighter, more interesting, more engaging, better stuff. Like as a result, we're gonna be making better stuff. Just think about it. So again, I truly believe in that. So Matt, for some of these conversations, I've noticed that towards the end of it, we're just kind of like, oh, okay, it's been a long talk, and let's just go, especially when it's that late, let's just go to sleep. But for some of these conversations, I mean, I feel like you can get going, and I feel like there's so many things. Like I haven't even covered like a third of what I wanted to say. So I think that's definitely a good point as far as let's talk more about it. And in fact, let's make this a thing, a subject, a thread that goes through all of our content we're gonna be creating going forward. So definitely very meaningful subject tonight. I appreciate you being vulnerable, and I appreciate you kind of being honest here tonight. And so, guys, if you're watching us, I mean, just it's okay. It's okay. Just don't give up. And there's definitely a better way. Go get a vacation. Go get some time off. Go watch a movie by yourself, and enjoy thoroughly.
Do what it takes.
Yeah, go get on the bike. Go do something, and then just reset yourself, because you deserve more, and this world needs you. So, Matt, again, super meaningful conversation. I'm looking forward to our next one, and thank you again. Anything you wanted to mention before we log off here?
Yeah, it's great. Just great to see you there, Anton. And been doing a fair amount of traveling here. It's like I've felt kind of disconnected here, even though it's been kind of just a few weeks here from Tennessee and the others back there. It's always fun to kind of reconnect with different relationships, kind of up here in Michigan, and coworkers and things like that too. And exciting to meet people in other cities that are trying to achieve the same things that Chattanooga has been working on, has had a lot of traction and things too, and kind of, sharing those best practices back and forth too there. So just, like you said, just get out there, try and make an effort to travel, meet people from other cultures. You and I we tend to just have friends from different parts of the world, right? For one reason or another. And it's just, it's refreshing to get that different type of perspective. And, makes you think different.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Well, guys, again, thank you all for dialing in. This has been definitely a lengthy one. We just went over an hour here, but definitely meaningful. So I definitely appreciate your insights, Matt. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it, appreciated it. We are gonna do more of these. Stay tuned. Let us know if you have any questions, any sort of suggestions for any sort of upcoming episodes. If you want to be part of these episodes, I think we're about to get ready for us to add another couple of individuals here. So we're gonna have a more meaningful and a more kind of maybe engaging and more fun over conversations. Having a group of people here, maybe special guests. We've lined up a couple. But yeah, so stay tuned. Thanks a lot for dialing in today, and we'll see you guys fairly shortly. And be safe and have a good night. See ya. Alrighty.